Thanks. Well, on behalf of all of today's speakers today, let me warmly welcome you to our program. We've all heard, I think, I'm sure, about the China business boom. More contracts, more investments, more deals, more problems with the deficit if you happen to be in the States. But today we're going to be talking really about the flip side of the China business boom, namely the China disputes boom. Of course, it's a fact of life that disputes are a natural part of doing business anywhere in the world. But China, as with everything else, in fact, presents very unique and different sorts of challenges when it comes to managing business disputes. So in today's program, we're going to be looking at some of these challenges and examining some of the ways in which you can deal more effectively with the business disputes that you're likely to encounter in your own ventures in China. Now, joining us today, you've seen the list, we have some of the leading experts in the field in China. Most of them have traveled a good distance to be here today to share with us their experiences and their wisdom, and I would like to express to them my great thanks for joining in today's program. We've got, as you can see from the program, a very full day ahead of us. We'll be looking at mediation. We'll be looking at litigation in the people's courts in China. We'll then turn to hear from people who are actively engaged in arbitration inside China. We'll come back in the afternoon and look at it from the other side, arbitration outside China, the leading figures in the top institutions dealing with arbitrations in the world today involving China disputes. Then we'll hear a bit about intellectual property disputes. And finally, we'll turn to something which is what I call might be the new thing, and that is the possibility of bringing a claim not just against your Chinese counterparty, but against the Chinese government itself under one of the bilateral investment treaties which China has entered into worldwide. But to kick things off, I thought it would be useful if we would just start first with a bit of an overview of the various techniques that are available, the various options out there to you when you're involved in a business dispute. And presenting on this topic will be Dennis Brock, who is a partner at Clifford Chance, an old friend, who for many years headed up Clifford Chance's Asian dispute practice based in Hong Kong. And as you can see, Dennis is going to talk to us about getting out of trouble in China. Dennis.
All right. Yes, I'm going to be about 20 minutes going to give you an overview which will set the tone for the rest of the day, to which the other speakers will give a bit of texture and context. Broadly, I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to talk about Clifford Chance in China because you can read about that and we want to move through it a bit more promptly. A little bit about bits and a bit about formal methods of resolution and then some of the informal techniques. Let's get through that. Okay, bilateral investment treaties. I just thought it was worthwhile for a couple of minutes talking about these devices or these treaties opportunities because when you're considering an investment into China, you might take the view that the way you structure your deal could assist you in resolving disputes should you have a problem going forward. Well, what is a BIT? It's a treaty between nations where an investment recipient nation, for example China, and a foreign investor agree terms of protection, normally to protect investments, ensure free transfer of returns, and ensure non-expropriation. And if there is any of those events, if there is expropriation, if an invested country doesn't allow free return of investments or protection of investments, then you can have your dispute resolved by ICSID. China's entered into a number of BITs. Interestingly, in most of the BITs it's entered into, it reserves issues of quantum to its own national courts and requires or permits only issues of so liability is dealt with by the courts and quantum is dealt with by ICSID. An exception, and no one's too sure why, is the German BIT, by which the Germans managed to negotiate that both liability and quantum would be resolved within the context of ICSID. Now, so your first pause might be to ensure that if you have a German subsidiary or you consider creating a German SPV, you would take the benefit of the German-China BIT. You can also give some consideration to whether in your own home nation's BIT with China, there's a most favoured nation clause. This has been a bit of a debate, academic and a debate before ICSID, as to whether the most favoured nation clause can be used to elevate the status of dispute resolution within your own bit to the same status as the German bit. As you may know, a most favoured nation clause effectively says that I'm entering into an agreement with you, and you will treat me the same way as you treat every other nation to the highest possible standard. Now, if the German-China BIT contains resolution of all disputes, both liability and quantum before ICSID, then I can take the benefit of that because I've got a most favoured nation clause. And this has been being batted backwards and forwards before ICSID as to whether it works. And there were a series of cases up to June 2005 where the view seemed to be emerging that you couldn't really take the benefit of the most favoured nation clause for the purpose of arbitration, as there was a distinction being drawn between substantive rights and procedural rights. Last August, in a case called Suez and Vivendi, ICSID said, no, most favoured nation clause means most favoured nation clause. You can go forum shopping if you wish, and therefore the position currently seems to be that you can take the benefit of a most favoured nation clause. The reason I mention it, as I said, it's something to consider when you're drafting or entering into your investment into China as to how you might structure it. Now, moving forward, the topics I'm going to cover very quickly are litigation, arbitration, conciliation against mediation, friendly negotiations, and finally informal methods. So, this is a typical structure of how you might invest into China. A foreign company enters into JVC with a local co in which there's a degree of government involvement. And if you haven't given any thought to a contractual dispute resolution clause, then before you know it, you're going to be in litigation. In China, as we all know, arbitration clauses, dispute resolution clauses are typically referred to as the midnight clause because people only ever think of them after it's all too late. If you're in litigation, what's the trend? Well, many foreign corporations find themselves in a problem. It isn't all gloom. You can succeed. There are ways of managing litigation, and I know Ariel, who one of my former colleagues, is going to be dealing with that in greater detail a little later on. Generally, some people have a perception that there's little or no justice in Chinese courts. Again, that's probably a little unfair. Again, if it's properly managed, you can extract yourself from that problem. And again, you need to know how to manage cases in China. These are the areas where foreign corporations most regularly get themselves hooked into litigation in China. Intellectual property, where you probably don't have much of an issue, because if someone's infringing your patents or copyrights, then you're going to have to use the courts, because plainly you don't have a contract with them. Product liability, if you're a drug manufacturer and your product hurts someone, again, you're unlikely to be able to rely on a dispute resolution clause. You're going to find yourself in court. Unfair competition.